Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock, and this is City of Heroes. We are soloing the Stalker, level 38. With only about a 250,000 XP to go, I've been doing some offline soloing, trying to get a story arc. And we finally do have a story arc from Ginger Yates, and we're going to do that in a second. So this is the Terra Conspiracy, so we're going to end up with Mr. Hamadan's girlfriend being turned into a devouring earth. But first, I threw up some stuff on the auction house, so we got about 1.75 mil. So we now have almost 30 million influence, and we're doing just fine on our influence. I know if you're one of these people who does the influence farming, 30 million ain't much, but it's perfectly fine for my purposes. Since most of our enhancements are now IOs, as you can see, and we can look here, and I'm not going to do it, but you can see if we try to upgrade the ones that are just SOs, it's only 600,000, and it's going to go down every time we do it because we're going to keep replacing these things with inventions. So we're on +2 missions, and we're going to the Terra Conspiracy, or whatever it's called. And this is going to be against the Devouring Earth, who are actually quite annoying. Mostly because of the guys that put down quartz and stuff. I hate that. I mean, that thing just absolutely wrecks me. It essentially caps them on 2 hit. So they just hit me with everything. And if they put it down just in the amount of time it takes me to get out of the radius, my head point bar will go down like 3/4. Just because I'm getting hit by every single shot. And that shows you how much our defenses really help us, because that doesn't happen ordinarily, right? So guys, as we go, one of the things I want to talk about, actually, I was thinking, it's not, how do I say this? It's not super important that I've been dying to talk about it, but it just occurred to me, and I was thinking about it in terms of a different game, and it's got nothing directly to do with City of Heroes, but it does have to do with MMOs and with video games in general. So there are 2 terms that are used in video games. Sorry, I just rubbed my nose there. I feel like I'm getting an allergy or something again. Who just threw at me? Somebody threw something at me. This guy. So there are 2 terms that you never really want applied to your software, whether it's a game or anything else: vaporware and abandonware. So they're related but different. Vaporware is the name applied to software applications that are, let's see who we're going to fight here. We want to save the text, but I also want to fight these guys. I don't know if we have to leave the text out. So vaporware is when you've got an app that you've been basically hyping and talking about how great it is and showing screenshots of it, but it's never actually been produced and no one can actually use it, right? And I've been forgetting to put these things in the base. I got to do that. So let's say somebody creates a mock-up of, anybody can create using Photoshop a mock-up of a cool looking UI like this. They can generate screenshots of stuff and then make it look like the program is actually working, but it doesn't. It's not complete. It never was complete. It's not probably even in early access. And so you can't, no one can actually ever use the program. And the game is in development, quote unquote, for sometimes years or even decades or like literally forever, and it never actually gets made or finished. That's called vaporware. And then abandonware is when you have some game or software, an application that was running and the developers abandoned it, right? For whatever reason, they stopped making the game or the application, and it probably still exists. You may or may not be able to buy it anymore, but if you have it on your computer, you can still run it. And then what often happens with abandonware is unless someone takes over and develops it, you end up with a system that won't run on the newer, an app that won't run on newer operating systems and stuff like that. And so, well, let's talk about City of Heroes. What was City of Heroes? City of Heroes was abandonware, essentially, right? It was abandoned, sunset in 2011, and it was no longer possible to play it. Even though people still had the client on their computer, there weren't any servers that you could connect to, right? And then Leandro, who's the guy who resurrected it originally, somebody smuggled the code of the beta of issue 24, right? Issue 24, which was in beta, they smuggled the code out of Paragon Studios or whatever, and somehow, and I still don't know if we know exactly how, Leandro got his hands on it and managed to find a way after several months to get a server up and running that he could look at this. I have 60% chance to hit, and I'm missing over and over again. That's ridiculous. What is going on with this? Why am I missing this much? 89, 65, 89, 77. Yeah, it's just not rolling anything under a 70. Look at it again, right? 70. 68% chance to hit, roll to 70. What is going on? Every single one of my shots missed. Do you see how many times I had to swing to beat that guy, even though I had a 2/3? I should have been hitting with 2 out of every 3 shots. Gosh. So he got it running and then let people he knew into his server, and those people could play it, but nobody else could. Now, the game is back, and it is, I guess, technically still abandonware, but it's abandonware that the players have managed to get together and continue, right? So sometimes with abandonware, the company can, somebody can take over for the company and keep it going. Another game that I played a lot and was abandoned because the parent company said we're not funding it anymore, and they basically the devs were all laid off, was Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which is a game I really liked. It had a number of issues, and there actually is a player. He has a channel on YouTube, Brother Monroe, his name is, and he has. They abandoned the game, and I don't think the code itself has been exposed, but the config files have, and he and one of the other players who had already been making mods for it are trying to use the mod process to update, fix, and improve and rebalance the game. They can't build anything new, right, because they don't have access to that level of the code base, but they have managed to rebalance the ships and increase the number of countries you could use and give them new flags and colors and things like that, and that has kept the game going for some people, although the game has been abandoned. It's abandonware. I'm playing Lock and Load Tactical, which is based on a board game. It seems to me like Lock and Load Publishing abandons a lot of stuff because their game has been in early access for a couple of years, since 2023, but it doesn't look like it's ever going to come out of early access. And beyond that, that's the digital game, but even the physical game, I was like, okay, let me see if I can buy some of the box sets and stuff. They don't exist even on their own website. You can't buy them anywhere. Well, the one expansion that looked pretty cool, it's called the Bitter Harvest. I was like, let me see if I can get that. You can't buy it anywhere. I thought, well, it's been too long. The thing just came out a couple years ago, and it's totally out of print already. So it seems almost like the board game as well as the digital game is kind of abandonware, right? And so that's one thing. And then you have vaporware, which is where the game was hyped up and then never came into existence, right? It happens a lot with video games, more than just regular apps, I think. But yeah, you have this game that was hyped and hyped and hyped, and it was going to be cool, and it had all these innovations, and then it just never happened. And I was thinking, I remembered being on an MMO forum. I couldn't remember which one at first. And I made the accusation that the game was vaporware. And one of the devs for the game was actually on the forum, saw that accusation, and absolutely flipped out and got really mad and kind of flamed me. And then that dev got flamed because, no, the game had all the signs of vaporware. And I couldn't remember which game was it. And as I was thinking about it, I realized it was Hero's Journey. Hero's Journey was hyped up as early as, I think, 2003. I knew about it from my best friend. He's the one who told me about COH. And right around the same time as COH was getting ready to come out, he was like, COH is cool, but what I'm really excited about is Hero's Journey. And this game was supposed to be this new, innovative, awesome fantasy game. And it was going to, in addition to the game itself being something you could play on their servers, they were talking about how they were going to release the engine of that game, which they called the Hero Engine for Hero's Journey, to other developers so that other developers could use their innovative, wonderful, amazing system, much the way, the Unreal Engine, right, started with Unreal Tournament, which was just a game that was like a PvP arena type game, and then it expanded because the engine was so good to be able to do a lot of things. And now the company that used to make Unreal Tournament, I don't know if they still do, but what they're mainly doing is making the engine, right? And so I guess the guys at Hero's Journey figured this is a way to make more money than you can with simply an MMO, right? An MMO, you have to rely on the subscriptions to your game, but if you can license your engine to other companies, then you're getting extra money in addition. So my best friend, as cool as he thought COH was, he was super hyped for Hero's Journey. And so 2004, they're making all these screenshots, they're telling you how great the game is, and they keep making dev vlogs and everything else. And then 2005 goes by, 2006 goes by, 2007 goes by, 2008 goes by, and nothing. No early access, no alpha, no beta, no nothing. And as far as we can tell, other than the screenshots and like that they had made the engine, we were pretty sure that that was true. But an engine isn't a game. An engine is just how the game works, right? It's the mechanics of the game. But in order to make a game, you're going to need assets. You're going to need to make, the artwork. You're going to need to design quests. You're going to need to design the world lore and all the rest of that for a fantasy world. Build cities and towns. And they hadn't done any of it. And they hadn't done any of it in like 6 years. So on the MMORPG.com forums, which I read back then, but I don't read anymore, somebody mentioned Hero's Journey, and I just sort of made the offhanded comment, well, that's vaporware anyway, and one of the devs got on and just absolutely freaked out. No, we're not vaporware. We're actually, the game is going to happen 100%, right? Well, guess what? It never happened. It got sunset. They sold the engine or rented it or whatever to BioWare in 09 or 10 for Knights of the Old Republic. BioWare used it. And I remember when it was announced that they were going to use the Hero Engine for Knights of the Old Republic, or not Knights of the Old Republic, the Old Republic, the MMO, when that was mentioned, a number of players, not players, but like coders. We're going to pause here just a sec. This is a tough room to fight in. Again, remember, they tend to look down and not up as much, so I normally start up at the top. We're going to start here and work our way back in. So yeah, a number of people on the BioWare forums warned them against using the Hero Engine because there were a number of inherent problems and performance issues. I don't know how this person knew it because the Hero's Journey game hadn't come out. I don't know if it was somebody who had looked at the code somehow. I'm not really sure. But several players warned them not to use the Hero Engine, that there were inherent limitations in that engine that they were going to regret. And I'll just ignore this guy. He'll come back to me eventually. And Yeah, that actually happened. There were a lot of performance issues in Star Wars: The Old Republic when it first came out, and I can't remember who it was that said like one of the fundamental problems with the game that has haunted it to this day, is the hero engine, which has a number of inherent limitations based on the fact that the engine was originally designed back in 2003, 4, 5, right? So I'm pretty sure it never obtained the capability to work with multiple cores in processors, because when they designed it, most of the people were on single core, and multi-core processing didn't really become a thing until several years later. And maybe that was one of the inherent limitations that people were complaining about. They were trying to warn BioWare, it's 2011 now. Everybody's got a multi-core processed game, and if you guys are using single-core processors, you're going to have performance issues. A lot of MMOs, though, remain single-core for a long time, and COH certainly is right now, and it's not a problem. So I don't know if that was the limitation they were arguing about or not. Whatever happened to that guy that ran away? He never came back, or did I accidentally get him in a Shadow Mall and not notice? Um, but yeah, I can still remember being absolutely flamed by this developer for calling it vaporware, and getting defended by a bunch of the players on the forum, who said, "Yeah, this is abandonware, or vaporware rather," and getting pounded here. Yes, this is vaporware, and he was right to say it, because your game has been sort of stuck in development limbo where you're still working on the engine 6 years later, right? If that game was going to come out anytime soon, you wouldn't still be working on the engine. Um, so yeah, a lot of times games end up vaporware. Who's attacking me? Stop it. These guys are so annoying. Okay, so we got a clue, but we got some guys to save. Let's go back up. I like to work this room from top down, as I say. But yeah, that's one of the sort of biggest insults you can give to a developer, is to call their game vaporware. And the thing is, they don't want people to get into the consciousness that the game's vaporware, because then all the hype becomes not hype, right? Nobody's going to care about a game that they don't think is going to come out, right? And they're using the hype to try and get you excited about their game. Now, there have been some games that seemed like vaporware and eventually came out after years and years, but oh, here he is. But most of the time, when a game doesn't come out for too long, it never comes out. Speaking of games coming out and superhero games, there was a game that my best friend was really excited about and I had no interest in, called Ship of Heroes. And that was supposed to be an alternative to COH when COH wasn't around, but COH is back now, so I have paid zero attention to it. Apparently it did launch last year and did not do very well. That there aren't a lot of people using it, apparently a very low number of concurrent users, and it just wasn't very successful. I don't know a lot of the details, but I did see some gameplay footage, and I don't think I would like that game. But I didn't think I would like it to begin with, and I'll tell you why. Ship of Heroes, unless they changed it in all of the screenshots and everything, this is why we need I-beams. See that? That's why we need I-beams, because we can enhance them for accuracy so we don't miss. My understanding of that was that it has from all the screenshots, it appeared to have a global cooldown. COH does not have a global cooldown, and I hate global cooldowns. One of the things I like about COH is that it doesn't have one. So let's talk about what's a global cooldown. A global cooldown is different. COH has only I don't know what you want to call it, a local cooldown, the cooldown in City of Heroes is per power, right? So each time I click on a power, it has a recharge time, and it recharges, right? Who's throwing stuff at me? But the other powers, you know, if I click on this Assassin Strike, when all the other powers are charged, nothing else has changed. With a global cooldown, what happens is each power does have its 5, 6, 7, however many second recharge, right? Cooldown, recharge, same thing. But in addition to that, when you click a single power, all the powers will trigger, and then for like very quickly in 1 second they will recharge. So pretty much this prevents you from doing anything else for some whatever period of time the developers want you to wait in order to do the next power. So it might be a half a second or a second or whatever. And so I hate that where I click one power and all my powers cycle for a second. I don't like that at all. So I don't like games with global cooldowns, and I generally don't play them. I find it really annoying. Why? If the power is on, like if powers were on only a global cooldown, that is, everything was on a 1 second cooldown and you could do one thing a second, but you can reuse individual powers as much as you want, so that, in other words, we could go smite, 1 second smite, 1 second smite if we want, I might not care. But with a global cooldown, one of the things I don't like is that you still have these individual cooldowns. So Assassin Strike is still going to take 10 seconds to recharge, but when I trigger it, all these powers take 1 second to recharge before I can click on the next thing. So I don't like that. I like that COH has a queue. There used to be games like Star Wars Galaxies, you could queue up 12 things at once. I like the fact that COH just has a small queue, right? You can queue up one power while you're executing another one, but not 3 or 4. I feel like that's perfect. I don't need a long queue, but I definitely don't want it so that when I hit this, I can't click anything else until this recharges. And also, most games with global cooldown, if you let me show you this, right? So we're going to Assassin Strike. When I click it again, right, it says it can't do it. Let me show you with a different power, because Assassin Strike is a little different when you're in hide. So we're going to do hide. Are you kidding me? How did I have a 68% chance to hit this thing? That's ridiculous. Okay. Alright, so now let's attack this guy, right? We hit Shadow Punch. If I try to click Shadow Punch again before it recharges, it will queue up and say recharging. It won't fire, but it will queue up if I want. Right? And I can wait for it to fire, and it won't, it will, in other words, it keeps my command. I gave you a command to fire this power. If I click on it and it's not recharged, it'll hold the command, and as soon as the power recharges, it will fire again. Right? So that's what I like. Most games, every game I've ever seen, I haven't seen them all, but every game I've ever seen with a global cooldown, if a power is cooling down, is recharging, and you click it, it just doesn't work. It might say not ready, but it doesn't queue up. It just deactivates your selection, right? And you got to click it again. And I don't like that. And so when you combine that with a global cooldown, where anything that's not totally up, if I click on it, it just deactivates as if I didn't click on it, that is just aggravating to me. I like that COH lets me queue something up. If I click too early, I can just wait and it'll do what I told it to do. I don't have to do that. I can click something else that is recharged. But if for some reason I want to wait for that thing to come up, it will wait for me and then boom, trigger it as soon as possible, which is why you can control click, right? Because what control click does is as soon as it recharges, if the conditions are right, it will fire. Right? So you can control click build up, and then every time build up recharges, it fires. And then it holds the request to recharge it until it fires again. And I really like that. So not a fan of games with global cooldown, which is why when I saw that out of Ship of Heroes, I was not interested. I also felt like the theme of that game was a little strange. As I understand it, it's called Ship of Heroes because the city is basically the city is like a flying spaceship, city sized, and we're all on the spaceship together. And why we'd all be on the spaceship together as heroes and villains, I don't really know, but it seemed a little strange of a concept to me. And I guess that's why they were. That's their explanation for like why they're like. For instance, thing about City of Heroes, you got the war walls and everything. They can explain that away by saying, "Well, you're on a ship and you can't leave," right? So that's why we have walls around the city, kind of like the arcs from Ark. But I just thought that was a strange concept for a superhero game. Like, why would there be superheroes and supervillains on this ship? Why would it be? Why would it act like an Earth city, even though it's flying around outer space in the far-flung future? It just seemed a little strange to me. Now I don't know exactly what the world lore is, so maybe they did explain it better. But it seemed like a strange concept. Mostly, it just didn't look like I would enjoy the gameplay. I like this style of gameplay, and Ship of Heroes didn't seem like this. Now, it's possible that if COH had never come back and there weren't any other good superhero games to play, that maybe I would have tried it. I know about Champions Online, of course. I have played it a few times. I started playing a free. I've started a 1 month sub to Champions Online. Well, obviously when it first came out, I got the free month, and then I've done 1 month subs 2 or 3 other times. I've never been able to get it past a month. I've never been able to get past like 20th level. I just don't. I just don't enjoy that game the way I enjoy this one. There are so many little things about it that I don't like. That game, there's energy instead of endurance, which you have to build by doing your default attack, basically brawl, over and over and over again to build your energy bar, and then you can use other attacks that shrink the energy bar. And this was billed as being more quote-unquote active, so that you're not just standing there waiting for the energy bar to regenerate, the endurance bar to regenerate, which I understand, but to me, just doing brawl over and over again to regenerate my endurance bar is not an improvement. Because it doesn't actually do anything to the enemies, right? So you're being active in the sense that you're clicking a bunch, right? But you're not being active in the sense that you're actually doing a darn thing to the bad guys. Alright. We have defeated nearly... I'm glad I did everybody because it was a defeat all. I wasn't even really paying that much attention to it. But we've got just these guys, it looks like, to take out. And there we go. Mission complete, guys. So that lets us head out. And we're going to talk to Ginger. I keep on calling her Jenny Ferguson. We're going to talk to Ginger Yates. And we're going to continue with the next mission. But before we do, I do need to pause for just a second, and I'll be right back. Alright, we are back. And now we need to go to Steve Sheridan, to Brickstown, and chat with him. So yeah, post in the comments. Have you ever had your eye on a game that looked so cool, like my best friend did with Hero's Journey, and he was so disappointed? I remember at one point I finally said to him, "You do know that game is vaporware, right?" And he was like, "Yeah." He was really unhappy about it. Or have you ever, besides City of Heroes, because I know there's one game that you played, possibly, if you used to play it back in the day, that was abandonware. Have you ever had a game that got abandoned? Heck, a lot of the Avalon Hill and Victory games from back in the day. Yes, Multiman Publishing has taken over Advanced Squad Leader and some of the other Avalon Hill games and republished some of them, but a lot of those games are abandonware, if you want to call it that, which is a shame. Lots of games start in early access and never come out of it, and effectively become abandonware, right? They're not vaporware because they're in early access. You can actually play a version of them, but they're abandoned. And I guess it's interesting to figure out what's the line between abandonware and vaporware. I mean, like, Hero's Journey was pretty much vaporware. The engine was complete, but the actual game they were talking about building, the assets, the quests, the world, the lore, none of that ever existed, other than demo stuff. They never actually built character classes, races, nothing that you could actually. The game was never playable as a game. The engine could be used in somebody else's game, which is why they use it for the Old Republic and I think one or two other games, but even there, the engine was only used for a few games. But it was never used for Hero's Journey. So the game Hero's Journey was, I think, pretty clearly vaporware. But on the other hand, because they did produce a complete engine that was usable by other companies, maybe you could call it abandonware. I think, whereas Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, which was a game that was in wide release and thousands of people bought it and played it, and it was around for several years, that's clearly abandonware because it ran, right? They didn't just make an engine and not finish the game or something like that. It actually ran, and you can play it to this day. It's just not being developed anymore, right? And City of Heroes, obviously not vaporware. It's abandonware, right? It was abandoned by the original devs, but it was not. It was playable, right? Whereas Hero's Journey was never playable as Hero's Journey. And then we have other games. I mean, there was an infamous game that I won't name because there's a lot of controversy around it for a variety of reasons I don't want to get into that are political. But there was a game that was a kind of a Fortnite, Overwatch kind of a game clone. And they thought they were going to make billions on it, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars making this game. And it was out for a week and then canceled. So that's abandonware. But it's close to vaporware, right? Because it was really only out for a week. So I don't know. What constitutes the line between vaporware, which is a game where they maybe made a few assets and did enough to make screenshots, but they never actually produced a working game, and abandonware, where it was there and then got abandoned. I sort of feel like if the game was at least playable at an early access level, that is, you could go in and play the game, and you could play most of the game, right? It's not just the tutorial levels, right? A level 1 to 50 game where you can only do level 1 to 5, but you can actually play to the 40s, and you can play through most of the game, and most of the base assets are in there, and they just don't have all the quests finished or something like that. I feel like if it's at least purchasable, playable, and playable to a pretty decent degree, early access, I feel like then it's probably abandonware if they don't finish it. On the other hand, if it's a game that no one's ever been able to actually play or anything beyond a demo, then I would say that's vaporware. But what do you guys think? And have you ever been victimized by this, like my best friend was, where you're super, super hyped for a game that you're convinced is going to be awesome, and another miss with a 97, and you're really excited and you really want to play this game, and it never comes out? Every time, I've got to stop doing this. So every time I fight these guys, I do my normal sequence. And part of the problem, and the reason I get hit like that, is because I get stuck in Shadow Mall. And then I'm end up standing in the quartz for the duration of the Shadow Mall while they're pounding me. Now, they hit me twice in a row. Guardian hits you. Crystal Shard's power had a 95% chance to hit. Quartz pummels you has a 95% chance to hit. You see that? That's what the quartz is doing. 95%. I don't know how that was still happening over down the hallway, though, because I ran out of the quartz. But that tells you how much that quartz does. And that, to me, is absurd. Right? I have 30% defense. That quartz gives them so much bonus that it completely negates my 30% defense and gives them 95% to hit. Right, now these guys have a base because they're higher level than I am, right? They're 41, they were, right? So they're 3 levels above. They have a base to hit of probably 75%, right? Now you subtract out my 30, that brings them down to 45. So that quartz is giving them at least plus 50 base to hit. You know, plus 50 to hit buff, not base to hit. That's why those things absolutely shred defense-based characters. I feel like going back to abandonware and vaporware, I feel like the of the two, probably the abandonware is more heartbreaking, right? Because vaporware, you can think a game sounds like it's going to be cool, but since it's vaporware, you never played it, so what's the big? You know, it's not that big of a deal. Um, but when you're talking about abandonware, this is a game that people were able to play, and they maybe played it for a long time, like City of Heroes, and then all of a sudden you're not able to play it anymore, and that can be really difficult, really heartbreaking as a player, because you may have a guild, you may have guild mates, you may have developed a lot of relationships within the game. I was actually going to mention this in an earlier episode, and I got caught up talking about other stuff, and I never got to it. But we were talking about when City of Heroes first came back, and I mentioned the guy who, after he had to leave, he did like sewer runs, and after he had to leave, and said I had to go now. One of the players said welcome home, and he said I had tears in my eyes. I remembered there was another story of a guy who was he and his wife had played City of Heroes back when it first launched, and they met as guildmates, as supergroup mates or something in COH. So that's how they met, right? And then they got married, and I don't know if they have kids now or whatever, but they got married, and the game died and everything. And when they found out that Homecoming had come back, that City of Heroes had come back, and they had the Homecoming servers, they logged in, and each one of them recreated their character that they played when they were meeting each other, when they met each other. And he said when they finally got together in game, like they were sitting in the same room, I guess they were on two different computers, like his wife was on the laptop and he was on the desktop, or vice versa. He said when we got in game and our characters got together, his wife was crying, right? Because they hadn't ever been able to do this. They had anniversaries and stuff, and the game was gone for nearly a decade, and they'd never been able to go back in game and just have that experience again, right? And so games like this can mean a lot to people, and so when they get abandoned, when they're suddenly gone, it can be very difficult, especially with an MMO, right? Because Ultimate Admiral Dreadnought's okay. There is a gaming community for sure. All the people who play the game are, part of a few channels that do Let's Plays, and they have a forum on the modding site for the mods and stuff. So there's a community, but it's not quite the same thing as in an MMO where you're actually gaming with each other day in and day out. You have a guild, you have guild officers, you have guild events, you have group task force nights and things like that, group raids and quests. You're bringing new people on, you're helping those new people to learn the ropes and all the rest of it. And you form real bonds of friendship with a lot of these people. And then all of a sudden that game is gone and you don't have it anymore. And sometimes you can hop to another MMO and play that. But one of the problems with that is that not everybody's going to agree. Right? So yeah, so Star Wars Galaxies gets canceled and we switch to City of Heroes, maybe. But not everybody who played Star Wars Galaxies likes superheroes and wants to play COH, right? Or we switch to some fantasy game like back then Vanguard or EverQuest or something like that, World of Warcraft. Well, not everybody's going to want to necessarily play fantasy or that particular game, right? Maybe the person doesn't like EverQuest or doesn't like World of Warcraft or doesn't like a Dark Age of Camelot or whatever one it is that you're trying to play together. And I mean, we had this happen multiple times. Stop running. We had this happen multiple times in my guilds where once we were done with one game and we would say, let's try another game, we could never agree on what game we should do. There were always going to be people who were going to say, but I don't like Star Wars, or I don't like City of Heroes, or superheroes, or I don't like fantasy, or I don't like World of Warcraft, or whatever the game happens to be. The theme, the style of the game, maybe the genre, maybe the particular company that they don't like. Right? I won't play a game made by Microsoft or something like that. I do that sometimes, right? There are companies I won't play games by them because, like, for instance, anything made by Hasbro. I don't like what they did to D&D, and I will have nothing to do with them. So now if a bunch of my friends want to play some online game that's under the Hasbro aegis, I'm going to say I don't think so, right? So, I mean, there are always things like that. Just because you were all playing Star Wars The Old Republic together doesn't mean you're going to all want to play City of Heroes together. And that does make it hard. It's very similar to role-playing game groups, a tabletop role-playing game, right? If the GM, we've talked about this, decides, well, I'm tired of Deadlands. I like to play something else. Or I'm tired of Savage Worlds. Let's play a percentile dice-based game or something like that. Whatever it happens to be. If the other players aren't interested in horror or aren't interested in percentile dice games or whatever, Call of Cthulhu, whatever your game is, you might not be able to keep the group together. And it's the same thing with MMOs. Not everybody's going to want to play the other game. Just because we got together to play City of Heroes doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to even like Champions Online, let alone Star Wars The Galaxies or Vanguard Saga of the Heroes or pick your other MMO that's not superheroes. And so that can be very hard. It's one thing when the group moves on for other reasons, but it can be extremely difficult when the game just goes away, and even though you all want to keep playing City of Heroes, you can't anymore. And that means that, especially in a larger guild, there's going to be a guild breakup because not everybody's going to be able to follow you to whatever the other game is. Might even be something as simple as COH is an older game and my computer can run it, and this other newer game, Champions Online, Ship of Heroes, whatever it is a newer game that takes more resources and my computer can't run it. Right? It inevitably leads to a breakup of the group. And that's always a sad thing, I think. Thought I had this guy targeted. One thing I don't like about the gigantic, huge, massive, overly sized Devouring Earth is that the Devouring Earth are so tall that I have to tilt the camera in order to see their names and to see floaties going up over their heads, which is really annoying, actually. They're too big. I understand that they're big, but they could have made them this high and it would have been fine. They didn't need to be as high as they are. Okay, last activist hopefully is in this room because I don't know where else they would be. Yep. You can see me? Why could you see me? Didn't I? Alright, well, we'll remedy that. Okay, that's the end of that mission. We're not going to bother with the little shard guys. They're pointless. And we're going to call Ginger, and I think that's probably good for today, guys. So leave your comments down below. What games, if any, have you essentially been victim of abandonware or vaporware, right? Have you had your heart broken by, I mean, obviously figuratively, not really, but have you had your heart broken by a game that you were so excited for but never came out? Or a game that was out and then got abandoned? You can include City of Heroes, obviously, but I think many people in this audience probably did have that experience with COH. But what other games has this happened with? Let me know in the comments. And until next time, we are soloing the Scrapper. Wow, we're almost level 39. We'll hit that next level, next episode. Until next time, I'm Scrapper Lock, and this has been City of Heroes, soloing the Stalker.